let me let me actually. You mentioned that you had some questions for me. Um,
My question, yes, my question's for you. You mentioned in an email that you sent to me to set up this interview, you said that you thought that horror needed a revival of art in horror, or I think as you put it, artistic horror, in order to revivify or give new blood to horror. And I wish that you would expound on that a little.
sure. I I think that horror needs a bit of a. I think it's getting a bit of a not facelift is the wrong word. But it's getting a bit of a revamp for this new age. Like back in the 80s, it was all about slashers. It was all about like these very hard like earned tropes. But now that you're in like 2020, now that we were in 2010, things have changed irrevocably. And you're getting horror movies that reflect on that change, like Get Out or It Follows, The Babadook, Nightingale, as well. They really follow up on these sort of changes. But I think there also needs to be more of a move in extreme cinema towards, and in horror cinema, for the non concrete, for stuff with a little bit more ambiguity, for a lot more art house and horror. And you're seeing that with movies like Dis, and I think that's something that's really going to be brought up and brought to a head soon. There just needs to be more of a thought to both social consciousness and horror, but also aesthetic and artistic consciousness. I feel there's more of a move towards realism these days, and it makes me a little sad.
What do you think it is in the non-concrete that is good for horror?
I think the thing in the non concrete that's good for horror is just the fact that looking at horror is like looking at like a Rorschach test. What the movie I think it's called They Live. The movie They Live can be seen in so many different ways by so many different people. And it is essentially just a movie about aliens showing up on the planet and they integrated into our society and now they're the ruling class. But it's seen by so many people in so many different ways. I think we can get even more like I think we can even get less concrete with it. Put people in a real uncomfort zone cuz when it comes to the reviews of Dis on IMDb that are like, I don't really get it, I don't quite understand it, that shows to me that people are uncomfortable with that. And that's what horror is supposed to make you feel scared and uncomfortable. And we
That's
need more
pretty.
of that.
That's pretty interesting that you say that. And the way that horror, modern horror, generally tries to make you feel uncomfortable is by jump scares or roller coaster rides. So we like those because we're used to them. Maybe it's like always going to the same restaurant because that's
Yeah,
where we go.
it's
How interesting that horror comes from being put in as in a place of non-comfort. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no. Keep going. Sorry.
I was just going to say I'm a big fan of some of the silence. The performances are exaggerated because they were that was the style then, but there's a lot of truth there, and I'm a particular fan of Lon Chaney. And Chaney contorted his body to create things that made people very uncomfortable. And his Phantom of the Opera from 1925, his the original ending of the film is Eric has released Christine, and he dies uh, of a broken heart at his organ. And so that version was tested, and audiences hated it because the monster can't die of a broken heart. The monster has no heart, obviously, because they're a monster. They're not like us. Whereas what Cheney was trying to do was to put humanity into his monsters and thus make us all monsters. And it made people really, really uncomfortable. And so they changed the ending to this. I mean, pardon me, but it's a bullshit ending with Eric being chased by a mob and pretending that he has a
Oh, the
bomb and he
pitchforks.
doesn't. And oh, so he's evil. And they throw him off the river, off the bridge, because they didn't have the guts. to be comfortable with the fact that they helped to create this monster and that he was just like them. I really agree with what you say, that if people react this vehemently to a film and says, this is stupid, I hate everything about it, that's what a child says when you call them a name that kind of hits home. How
Yeah.
interesting.
And the other thing is, well, you sat through it, didn't you? You did sit through it. You sat through the hour-long movie and it riveted you for an hour. And
And gave it a
and
one.
then you gave it a 1. There's
They
something
love to give
brilliant
ones.
about that.
I don't know what it is about the IMDb ones. And generally, the one reviews will say, everything about this movie sucks. I hate it at all. I'm like, everything?
You sat through it.
Oh, some of them will even say, I watched for 5 minutes and nothing happened. One. So, yeah, my favorite projects I've been involved in get a lot of ones on IMDb, but they have a loyal group of people who like them.
If it makes you feel any better, some of my favorite reviews I've done, nobody watches. Um,
Isn't that funny? Hmm.
I I mean, I started this channel honestly doing it for me, and I don't know. I feel that you're a lot happier doing roles for you as well sometimes, but I also find that I'm happier sometimes just doing stuff for me.
As long as the rent is paid, you are absolutely right. There are times when baby needs shoes, but if I have my druthers, absolutely. I just had somebody today write me, a director I've worked with before, and said I want to reimagine the werewolf genre in an art house way. I was like,
Ooh,
call,
I'm
let's talk.
excited.
Yeah, and I know that will not be a widely popular. People say, "Oh, a werewolf film," and they go, "What? This is weird. It's not the werewolf I know."
I don't
But
understand it, and it scares me.
right. I don't understand it. Why? I don't. They didn't tell me why. Well,
I I'm like, let me know when the werewolf movie comes out. I'm gonna be looking for this.
totally. You know what else makes people uncomfortable? Um, female roles, female role reversals in film. Now we say we're comfortable with it, but you watch, and a lot of times when there's a strong female role, it's written like a man.
Yep.
Because what we really want is to say, well, she's like a guy, so yeah, I like her. It's
Yeah.
really strange. Historically, horror has had a difficult time with females, swinging wildly from rampant misogyny to supposed female empowerment. But really, what you're saying is, we respect you if you go through a horrible trial. You're scarred and changed forever, but you're still beautiful.
Yeah, and
So
oh, sorry. And I find that over the recent years, there's been a change in that. I just covered a movie called The Love Witch, and that features one of my favorite female characters, written by a woman, Anna Biller. But she's smart, she's sassy, she actually really diminishes herself for the film. It's part of the whole action in it, but it's like she's smart, she's sassy, she reads like a woman. And sometimes I find with some directors, some male directors actually really hit it out of the park, and I'm like, wow, shocking. But with some, I'm like, yeah, written by a guy. I can appreciate some gender neutral roles like Ripley in the Alien series, but so often I find that reads a little bit like a guy, or like somebody gender neutral. There's really something about women writing their own experiences and writing their own horror heroines.
I'm glad that you say that it's changing. That's good. It's really good to hear because in the indie world, a lot of people have, especially the producers who are older and they provide the money. And, those are the female roles that they want. It's interesting what you say about gender. Uh, I try to put sensitivity into my roles. And sometimes I'll try to put overtly feminine mannerisms in the middle of rampant brutality, just because I think we both have male and female within us. And I did a movie called Circus of the Dead, where I play a necrophiliac, homicidal, serial murdering rapist clown whose day job, well, he is those things. His day job happens to be as a clown. But rather than make him brutal, I made him really soft. He's got this little curl on the top of his clown costume, and he's constantly playing with it and making sure that it's just right. And he primps a little, not in a comical way, but because I wanted him to have both male and female attributes, because brutality is not only the province of the male. But some reviewers did pick up on that and say, "Why does he have some effeminate mannerisms? We don't like that." And others said, "How very interesting." So yeah, it's I guess it's again, it's back to ambiguity, right? It's whether you're
Yeah.
comfortable or not.
It's about, and I think that's very interesting that you put like feminine performances and masculine performances together, because we're not, in truth, like, I I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm very feminine, womanly all the time, as I'm sure most people are not like, I'm a big macho man like all the time. There's ambiguity. There are times where I, as a woman, feel very masculine, but there are also times where I'm sure people as men feel very feminine,
Yes,
and
and
there's a
that's
little
why
bit of
that's why there
both.
used to be male only environments, because that's where men felt comfortable, because they felt that if they expressed that vulnerability to women, of course, then they would see them as less masculine. And I hope a lot of that has changed, but I still see it some in horror. Tends to be there is a contingent of female viewers, but at least producers believe that it's largely driven by males, by young males still. And so a lot of the content is produced with these rigid roles for that reason. There's rigid gender barriers.
It's actually really funny because majority of horror movie watchers are actually young women. I've read in some articles that like majority of horror watchers tend to be like younger women, and I've seen, especially on my channel, like women get very animated about horror. Like women love the genre. I think it would honestly because it's one of the few genres where we're the star. We're the main players. We're not just a sexy lamp. Oh my god, we get to run.
And the mail that I get in the interactions that I have at events is indeed from women. There are they're women your age, and then there are middle-aged women, and both of them are very passionate about horror. But I
Yeah.
don't think I want to lick any more women's faces.
Mm.
And I increasingly, when I see these just strictly "let's exploit women" bits in the scripts, um, I just think I don't want to do that anymore. Enough of that.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. If you don't mind, I'm gonna move to just three short questions about horror in general. So what are your favorite horror movies, Bill?
What are my favorite horror movies? I'm going to tell you two, one obvious and one not. One is The Exorcist, which is the obvious one. The reason I think it's so scary is that it's very strong evil and very strong good. I think it's a mistake to make only evil powerful. There has to be the counterbalancing force. And we know in the world of The Exorcist that there is good and it's strong, but evil's strong too. And again, ambiguity at the end of it, we don't know whether evil or good won.
Yeah. I
They
mean,
just
what
they just drive
happens?
off and we don't know. And that's so all of it's very frightening to me. So that's the obvious one. And the one that's not obvious is a film called Amadeus, which is about the life of Mozart. And by and large, it's a biography of Mozart, but there's a very important undercurrent, and that's the story of his relationship with Antonio Salieri, this rival composer. And Salieri is so jealous of Mozart's genius, so jealous that it drives him mad. And he ends the film in a madhouse because he was not given the talents that he felt he deserved. Instead, the talents were given to this ass who didn't even value them. And there's this scene where Salieri has promised God everything, his chastity, everything, but he wants something in return. He wants extreme musical talent. He doesn't have it. And so he takes the cross, he throws it in the fire and says, "Gracia, Signora. Gracia." thanks for nothing. And that's the turning point for him. He tries to steal Mozart's music, he denigrates him, and at the end of the film, it's a wraparound from the beginning. We see him in the madhouse. He's trying to kill himself, and he's wrapped up in this bloody bandage, and he's going through the halls of the mental asylum, and he says, "Mediocrities of the world, I am your patron saint. I absolve you." And it's so sad, but yet so horrible and so true to me, because I want to be things that I'm not and to be exceptional in ways that I'm not. And that character really struck me as a cautionary tale in the way that horror characters can. It still gives me a chill to see clips of Salieri, to see that bitterness, that he just could not let go of the fact that he was who he was, and he was not that other person. Jealousy, I think, can be a thing of horror.
I think that's a brilliant answer, and first time I've ever heard Amadeus as a horror movie. But there is almost a fate worse than death in wanting to be the best, like the greatest in your time,
Yes.
and failing and hitting mediocrity, because so many people wind up becoming these icons after they're gone. And it's something that you have to expect, but it's almost a fate that's cruel, that's worse than death, that you work so hard only to be recognized later.
Yes. So you
Or
have to be
maybe not at all.
comfortable. Whatever art you're doing, you have to be comfortable that you're doing it because it's meaningful to you, and let that be enough. And if you get good reaction from or bad reaction, that's the reaction that you get. But you're doing it for you, and that's very different from wanting to be famous or a celebrity. I think celebrityism is a disease. I know I've suffered from it. I think it's a disease in our society.
Ooh. Yeah, it's complicated. The relationship with celebrity. It's I mean, are you true being a celebrity, would you truly even be artistically fulfilled? I mean, that's something you got to ask when you put yourself out in the public spotlight. Will you be fulfilled not quite reaching fame or being just
Yeah.
under it, but doing the work that you want to do? So I've noticed a fair amount of your previous work is from the horror genre. What do you find draws you there?
I used to think it was my face, Pritchett. I did theater 14 years, and then I started doing film, and I got pulled into horror. And the more I did, the more I did, and the more I did, the more I did, and the more I did. I've always loved horror, but I never thought of myself as frightening or malevolent. Although I learned the camera sees me that way. But then I thought, that's kind of a bullshit answer to say, well, I'm just playing my face. I think that the camera, an old actor named Robert Loggia, I worked with, he was the guy who danced on the piano with Tom Hanks in Big.
Oh,
I worked with him just before he died, and I said, "What's your relationship with camera?" And he said, "The camera is your father confessor. You have to tell it everything." So the camera doesn't like lies, and it won't love you when you're telling lies. And so when I'm doing horror roles in which I'm playing dark facets of the human soul, I guess because I keep working and I keep getting these roles, I'm telling the truth. And so it's got to be a truth that's somewhere in me. So that's what draws me, is the fact that somewhere within me, as much as I try to deny it, there's there are dark facets of my own soul, and I cling to anything that keeps me from them. But when I play these roles and I surrender to them, and somebody will say, "Well, obviously they hired a true insane person for this role. That's not an actor." I've had that review before, and that makes me think, okay, okay, there's something dark in me, some dark things in me, and I keep the beast at bay, except for these roles which allow them to come out. So that's why I take it seriously, and it's important to me because I believe there really is evil in the world, and if it's my job to portray it, I need to do it honestly and completely. And but I've learned that I don't have to pretend as much as I would like to think I do when I play these roles. There's a part of me that really likes them.
That's a brilliant answer, and honestly quite selfless. It's very hard to put yourself on camera so rawly and to reach inside yourself and really look at the parts that you're like, ooh, I don't know if I love that, if I like that, consistently every time. And it's it's something that you especially have to do in the horror genre as opposed to like a rom-com or an action movie or a comedy. They're not to say that they are not difficult to do. I am not an actor myself, and like good lord, I could not do what you guys do. But there's so much in horror that requires you looking inward at the darker parts of you, and I think that's a very selfless approach. And my final question is, what performance are you most proud of?
I think it would have to be a recurring character I did on the CBS TV series Criminal Minds. I played a serial killer. He's a product of incest. His mother is Tobin Bell from the Saw movies. His father is Tobin Bell from the Saw movies, and his mother is Adrienne Barbeau. I'm the product of their teenage get together, brother and sister. Um, but I love this character because I got the script right over there in my office, and the producer, Breen Fraser, wrote, um, thank you for the most heartbreaking serial killer we've ever had on the show. And that's what makes me love this guy, because he's a wounded monster. He's physically repulsive. Um, he's emotionally very wounded. He's sadistic, and he's dangerous, and he's hurt. He's all of those things at one time. And he's so easy to dismiss and just to say, well, it's a good thing that he's gone because he was crazy and he hurt people, without even thinking about what he's gone through as a person or why. So for all those reasons, I love my wounded monster from Criminal Minds. Who and the series ended with him still being at large. He's one of three that are still wandering out there somewhere in the mythical Criminal Minds universe. He's still wandering around, not captured.
Good for him. Good for him. I suppose in the Criminal Minds universe. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. You were an absolute pleasure to talk to. Thank you for providing just such great, insightful answers. And just as a little note for my audience, please, please, please watch this. You'll like it. You'll like it. You'll like it so much. It's a great movie. It's a great one to add to the Disturbing Films canon. It's brilliant. And it's only an hour long, so no excuses, guys. Also, follow Bill on social media. You are at Bill Oberst Jr. Very easy to remember, it's just his name. So make sure to follow Bill for all his new roles, everything that's coming up in the future that he has to offer. And just thank you so much for joining us. Just, you are so brilliant, Bill.
Thank you for what you do, and thank you for providing such a unusual sideways perspective on what's usually a very commercial industry of horror. Yeah, on behalf of all of those who slave away and the artistic side of it, thank you, Bridget.
Anytime, and it is truly in a lot of instances a slaving away with the actors. I have never seen a genre that requires so much on a daily basis from horror actors. Serious respect for you guys.
Thank you.